It's time to give my notes and reflections on Chapter 14 of B.J. Penn's autobiographical book, Why I Fight. Chapter 14 is entitled Opportunity Awaits, and I read that chapter once and a half through because I began reading it. I got about halfway through the chapter, through the first fight that it describes. And then life got in the way. I went and did some life, and then had an opportunity to read again last night, and so I started at the beginning and read all the way through it and watched the fights that occur in the chapter. The first one is with Matt Hughes, and the way that BJ had already lost some of the fights that would have lined him up for the fight with Matt Hughes for the title that he had won before. And it doesn't look like he's going to get an opportunity to fight Matt Hughes anytime soon, but then something happens where George St. Pierre, who was scheduled to fight for the title, gets injured in training and is not going to be able to fight. And so an opportunity awaits for BJ, and he has his people contact the UFC and let them know that he is willing to jump in and take the fight, even though I think it's about 3 weeks away, and he hasn't been really training for it. And the UFC agrees, and so BJ goes into hard training for a few weeks to line himself up for fighting Matt Hughes. And several times, in the chapter, he expresses that he wished he had had more time to train. But I think after the fact of already knowing that you're not going to have much time to train and agreeing to, or asking to do the fight, you can't really go back and complain like that. But BJ does a little bit. Any case, he ends up losing the fight, but not because of his training so much as he gets an injury during the fight. He's grappling with Matt Hughes on the ground, and something he does, he's not sure whether it's prompted by anything that Matt does or whether it's just something that happens between their bodies meeting or what have you, or something that happens because of his own movement. Whatever happens, he gets a couple of broken ribs, and one of them punctures his diaphragm, and this is a serious injury. He knows something's very wrong. He tries to end the match with a submission of Matt Hughes. He's unable to get the submission, and then after that it's just very difficult for him to fight anymore, and Matt ends up getting him in a real compromised position where he's just pounding on him. I forget what the technique is called, but it's like he's got both of his arms pinned out like he's on a cross, and he's able to just pound on BJ's head until the ref breaks in and breaks up the fight. So he loses to Matt Hughes, and so this is bad news for BJ because his chances of getting another fight for that title anytime soon are it's just not there. And so he's not sure what he's going to do with himself. And then another opportunity presents itself. Dana White comes to him and asks him to be one of the coaches on Tough, The Ultimate Fighter, Season 5, I believe. And BJ has been wanting to be a coach on Tough. And Dana says, well, you're not going to believe who the other coach is. And so, BJ's like, who? And he says it's Jens Pulver. And this is the guy that BJ has wanted to fight for the longest time, since he just got into the UFC. He lost to him when he just got in during his first contract. He lost to Pulver, and he wanted to fight ever since, but Pulver kind of left the UFC, and then they got rid of the lightweight division, the 155, and so this was finally BJ's chance to get a fight with a rematch with Jens Pulver. And so of course he takes it, and he goes to Las Vegas, and he participates in the season of Tough. And actually, I've watched that season of Tough. I was very tempted while reading the chapter last night to revisit that season, but I had some time last night, but not enough time to watch a whole season of The Ultimate Fighter. But it did, some of the descriptions did bring back memories for me. Some of the things that happened in Tough that were really unique because of having BJ there. Like, even the day one, meeting all of the potential fighters when they're supposed to choose teams. And BJ's like, raise your hand if you know you want to be with me. And everybody practically there wants to be with him. That's kind of a real big put down for Pulver. And then one of the fighters that just wasn't, living up to what he was supposed to be doing there, or wasn't respecting the coaching, actually, basically, is what was happening. He wasn't listening to BJ's coaching, so BJ, kicked him off the team. That never happened before. So these are some of the unique things, and it just brought back my memories of watching that not very long ago even. And then they're gonna fight, and before they get into the fight itself, a couple of things happens with with BJ and his training and his identity. In terms of the training, he finally decides that he needs to get serious about changing his nutritional approach to the training, because he's been gassing out in all these fights, and he's getting into the third round, and he's got no fuel left. And if he's going for a title, those last few rounds are really, really tough, and he's not making it. He's losing fights because he's gassing out. So he decides to bring in a nutritionist to help him. Now, I wish that in this part he'd have gone into great detail about the way that this nutritionist assists him, because it's very apparent that he does in the fight. But he didn't really go into detail about how he changed his diet and all of this stuff, and what his training was like in that respect. And that's too bad. That's something you could have really learned from, because a lot of people, myself included, don't know enough about nutrition and how it relates to training. So, any case, that's one thing. And then he realizes that I don't know if he recognizes that all along he's been kind of a Hawaiian hero, but at this point, he starts getting more into his Hawaiian identity. I mean, he's always been there to represent Hilo and all of this, but he really wants to bring it out that he's there for all of Hawaii, and he knows that there's not a lot of Hawaiian heroes out there, and so he changes some things. He changes his music that he plays as he walks out to the ring. He starts using a Hawaiian song, which is really slow and very different from the kind of fast-paced rap or metal stuff that everybody else uses. It's a nice Hawaiian song that now he's so well known for that we tried to figure out what his old songs were that he used to walk out for, which I did, because one of them I liked. you can't find it because everything on the net relates to his Hawaiian song that he walks out with. He also um, designed his own shirt. Like, instead of using a sponsor at that point, he started walking out in his own T-shirt, which was about, it's talked about being Hawaiian and, Hawaiian and sovereignty and these kind of things. And so he was representing himself in Hawaii and not using a sponsor anymore, telling people to go to bjpenn.com. That was his sponsor. So he's going to promote himself. He's going to promote Hawaii, even though he has a little bit of an identity issue, being of mixed parentage, where his mom is part Korean, part Hawaiian, and then his dad is Caucasian, and but all the same, I think when he goes to fight, everybody sees him as Hawaiian, and certainly the people of Hawaii, to them, he's their hero. So yeah, this is what changes in him, and that's something that I can very much identify with, is that he's got back to his ancestral identity, is trying to boost that and trying to help in what way he can his native community. And so he goes to fight Pulver, and the fight, you can really see the difference in BJ. He really does have the energy now that he needs to carry out the fight. The Pulver is not an easy guy to beat, and I gotta admit my own kind of judgments on Pulver, because Pulver looks like the biggest white trash. He's got kind of this mohawk, and he's got these lines and stuff shaved into the side of his head. He's got a weird trailer trash shaped head with skinny teeth that look like they would splinter on impact, and kind of sticking out. And I don't know. To me, he just looks like poor white trash, and I start judging him for that. But then one of the things when I was reading this chapter and watching the fight, I was remembering, oh yeah, I judged him before, and but then I saw in that season 5 of Tough that he's a pretty good guy, in terms of being a coach and being there for his guys, he was even more there for his guys than BJ was. He kind of had more class in that respect, and then certainly with his fighting, when the fight started, I'm watching, I'm thinking, BJ's just a class out of this guy's league, but he's not. This guy actually gave him a good fight, and BJ did win, but it wasn't totally dominated. He eventually submitted him, but it wasn't easy. And so I gotta admit that I got problems sometimes, just judging people by looks like that, and here a guy shows that he's quite different than those kind of surface judgments. At the end of the fight, after BJ had won, something interesting happened where Joe Rogan came out there to do the interviews, and he went to go interview Pulver first, and you can see BJ kind of dancing around and looking out the side of his eye, kind of disgusted at the whole thing, because normally, and this is something he didn't even really mention in the book to this extent. He does mention it in the book that what ultimately happens here, but he doesn't betray that he was upset by this whole thing of Joe Rogan interviewing Pulver first, which looked to me to be the case. And I can understand that, because it's very, the protocol is always that you go to the winner and you get their statement, and then you go to the other guy. In this case, they went to Pulver. Pulver said some good things. He said him and BJ brought that weight class back for the organization, for the fans, and he hopes that everybody enjoys that weight class now, that it's set back in place, and the chances are they're not going to fight anymore, the two of them, because he's going to drop some weight and BJ's going to gain some weight, but they wanted to get that weight class established and so re-established, and so they did. So that was cool. But meanwhile, BJ's kind of seething on the sidelines because he's the winner of the fight, and why did Rogan go over to Pulver first? So when Joe Rogan does go to BJ and asks, what does BJ think, he says, well, if you want to know what BJ thinks, go to bjpenn.com, and he just walks off. So I thought, that was kind of funny, but it was a BJ like move, and that was pretty much the end of the chapter. But it should be said that one of the amazing things here is that he had gone all the way up to fight heavyweight, and now he dropped all the way back down to fight the lightweight, and he won. And this is the kind of thing that really sets B.J. Penn apart. So I'm going to go into chapter 15 now, and hopefully I can read that tonight and give my notes and reflections on that tomorrow. We're coming toward the end of the book.